Something tapped on my window at 120 kilometers per hour. It wasn't loud. That was the first thing that scared me. At that speed, anything hitting the glass should have cracked like a gunshot. Stone, bird, debris kicked up from the shoulder. Instead, it was a soft, deliberate talk. Fingernail on glass. Polite, almost hesitant. The sound slipped through the hum of the engine and the steady rush of wind, threading itself directly into my nerves. My hands tightened on the steering wheel, knuckles whitening as the car stayed obediently centered in its lane. Headlights carved a narrow tunnel through the darkness, the asphalt unspooling endlessly ahead. No other cars, no overpasses, just forest pressed close on both sides, black and dense, the kind that swallows moonlight. Don't look, I told myself, a stupid thought, reflexive. Looking wouldn't change anything. Still, my eyes flicked toward the passenger side window. Nothing. The glass reflected my own face instead. Drawn, pale, eyes too wide. The dashboard clock glowed 2:17. The radio whispered static beneath a late-night talk show. The host's voice distant and flat, like it was coming from another room. I turned the volume down until there was only the road and my breathing. Another tap. Same spot. Same careful pressure. Not a strike contact. As if whatever it was didn't want to break the glass. As if it wanted me to know it was there. My heart began to hammer, loud enough that I worried it might drown out the road noise and leave me stranded in a bubble of my own panic. I scanned the shoulder, the tree line, the strip of darkness just beyond the reach of the headlights. At this speed, anything pacing the car was impossible. Physics alone made it ridiculous. Yet the tapping kept time with me. Talk. Pause. Talk. I told myself it had to be debris caught in the wind, maybe a loose branch dragged along by turbulence. Something harmless, explainable. I rolled my shoulders, tried to loosen the tension crawling up my spine. Then the tapping slid upward. Not much. A few centimeters. Enough that I noticed. Enough that my breath caught halfway out. The sound changed too. Lighter now, almost curious. The kind of noise you make when testing a surface, learning its shape. I risked another glance. Still nothing outside. No shape. No shadow keeping pace. Just my reflection warped slightly by the curve of the glass. But behind my face, layered faintly over it, was a smudge where the tapping came from. A dull, cloudy print that hadn't been there before. It looked like the side of a hand. I jerked my eyes back to the road. My pulse roared in my ears. The speedometer needle hovered steady at 120. Slowing down felt like surrender. Speeding up felt like inviting disaster. I kept my foot where it was, teeth clenched so tightly my jaw ached. Another minute passed. Maybe two. The tapping stopped. Silence rushed in to fill the space it left, thick and heavy. I realized I'd been holding my breath and forced myself to inhale slowly, deliberately. My shoulders sagged an inch. The forest continued to blur past. The road remained empty. See? I told myself. Nothing. You imagined the rest. That was when something dragged along the glass. Not a scrape, no harsh sound, no resistance. More like a fingertip tracing condensation. A slow, downward glide that made my skin crawl. I flinched so hard the car drifted toward the shoulder before I corrected. My heart felt too big for my chest, each beat a painful thud. I swallowed, throat dry, and whispered aloud just to hear a human voice. No! The dragging stopped near the bottom of the window. A beat of stillness. Then 3 taps close together. Talk, 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 pattern. My mind latched onto it immediately, desperate for structure. 3. Pause. 3. Again. No, I thought. Don't do that. Don't make it into something. The radio crackled suddenly, volume surging on its own. White noise burst from the speakers, then fragments of speech. Syllables out of order, voices overlapping. I slapped the power button, but the sound continued, bleeding into itself, rising and falling like breath. And beneath it, faint but unmistakable, the tapping answered back, matching the rhythm. I felt very small inside the car then, enclosed, observed. The glass no longer felt like protection, just a thin membrane holding the outside in check. "Stop!" I said, louder now. My voice shook. "Please!" The tapping paused. For a terrible second, hope flared. Then it resumed, harder, more confident. The sound sharpened, knuckle instead of nail. The window vibrated with each impact, a subtle tremor that traveled through the door into my arm. I screamed and swerved, tires shrieking as I fought to keep control. The car fishtailed before settling back into its lane. My vision blurred with tears I hadn't felt form. I looked. I don't know why. Maybe some part of me needed confirmation, needed to know what shape fear wore. The glass was empty, but the reflection was wrong. My face stared back at me, mouth open in a soundless cry, and pressed against the outside of the window, overlapping my reflection perfectly, was another face, thin, gray, its features stretched as if molded from wet clay. Its eyes were open too wide, pupils blown, unblinking. Its mouth moved. Tap, tap, tap. Each movement of its lips matched the sound on the glass. I tore my gaze away, sobbing now, chest hitching as panic broke whatever restraint I'd had left. I fumbled for the hazard lights, then the high beams, flooding the road ahead with harsh white glare. The forest recoiled, shadows jumping back. The tapping accelerated. Not knocking anymore, pounding. The car shuddered with it. I was dimly aware of the speed creeping higher, 125, 130, my foot pressing down without conscious command. A sign loomed ahead, rest area, 2 kilometers. Relief crashed through me so violently it hurt. Lights, people, space. I just had to make it 2 kilometers. The tapping ceased. The sudden quiet was worse than the noise. It rang in my ears, a vacuum that sucked all warmth from the car. My skin prickled, every hair standing on end. I slowed despite myself, heart hammering as I waited for it to start again. Didn't. The rest area appeared like a mirage, floodlights, parked trucks, a low concrete building glowing softly. I pulled in too fast, tires crunching over gravel, and slammed the car into park. My hands shook so badly I had to try twice to cut the engine. Silence. Real silence this time. Human silence. The distant rumble of idling engines. The faint buzz of fluorescent lights. I sat there for a full minute, chest heaving, afraid to move. When nothing happened, I finally forced myself to look at the passenger window. The glass was intact. No cracks, no smudges, except for 3 small marks near the bottom edge. Not prints, not dirt, tiny chips, shallow, crescent-shaped, like impressions left by fingernails pressing just hard enough to bruise the surface without breaking it. I got out of the car, legs weak, and leaned against the cool metal, gulping night air. A trucker glanced at me from across the lot, concern flickering briefly before he turned away. The world went on. I almost laughed. Hysterical, ugly. That was when I noticed the sound. A faint tapping, distant but steady. Not on my car. On the rest area windows. All of them, moving from pane to pane, methodical and patient, as if whatever had followed me here had learned something important during the drive. At 120 kilometers per hour, it hadn't been trying to get in. It had been practicing. The next exit was labeled Last Chance, and the one after it was blank. I noticed because I was already tired, the kind of tired that makes your eyes sting and your thoughts smear together at the edges. I'd been driving for hours through a stretch of highway that didn't seem to belong to any state I remembered entering. The road was straight, the pavement dark and clean, the yellow lines almost luminous in my headlights. Forest pressed in on both sides, tall, dense, unbroken. No gaps, no houses, no reflected eyes, no other cars. The sign stood on the right shoulder, green and reflective, exactly like any other exit sign. Same font, same metal posts, same mild lean like it had settled over time. Last chance, 1 mile. I frowned and adjusted my grip on the wheel. Last chance for what? Gas? Food? A turnoff before a toll road? There was no icon, no arrow pointing to anything meaningful. Just the words. They prickled at me, But I told myself it was nothing more than a poorly worded local joke, some rural attempt at humor. The GPS on my dash said nothing. The map showed a simple line stretching forward, my position creeping along it. No exits marked, no labels, just the road. A mile later, the exit arrived. A narrow off-ramp sloping down into darkness, unlit, vanishing into trees so thick they seemed to swallow the pavement whole. No sign at the ramp itself. No indication of where it went. I stayed on the highway. Another sign appeared almost immediately after. Blank. Just a green rectangle, reflective paint shining back at me, mounted confidently on its posts. No peeling, no vandalism. No hint that anything had ever been written there. A chill slid under my collar, slow and unwelcome. My eyes kept flicking between the sign and the road ahead, as if the absence of words might spill into my lane and change something fundamental about where I was going. The radio murmured quietly, some late-night AM station. A man's voice, low and steady, talking about crop prices or weather patterns, his cadence soothing in a way that felt practiced. Every few minutes, the signal wavered, his words stretching slightly, pitch bending as if the tape were warping. I turned the volume down anyway. The forest thickened. The headlights no longer seemed to push it back as far as they should have. The darkness beyond the beams felt heavy, layered, as if there were depth to it, as if it had weight. Another sign loomed. Last chance, half a mile. My stomach tightened. I checked the clock. It blinked 11:48 p.m., then flickered briefly to 11:47 before correcting itself. I frowned harder at that. The car felt fine. The engine purred steadily beneath me. No warning lights. No vibration. Okay, I muttered to myself. Enough. I reached for the GPS and zoomed out. The map hesitated, then redrew itself. The highway was still there, still straight, but the scale indicator in the corner no longer made sense. Miles compressed into inches. The destination marker, my home, floated somewhere far off the screen, unreachable in a way that made my chest tighten. The GPS recalculated, and recalculated again. Continue straight, it finally said, the voice slightly flatter than before, almost careful. The next exit came faster than it should have. Another narrow ramp, another plunge into darkness. The sign before it read, last chance. No distance this time. I felt a strange urge then. Not panic, not exactly, to slow down, to take the exit. The thought slid into my mind smoothly, without argument, like a suggestion I'd been circling for a while and had finally decided to accept. I shook my head sharply, as if that might dislodge it. No, I said, louder than necessary. The word sounded thin in the car. I stayed on the highway. The sign after that was blank again. But this time, I could have sworn there were faint impressions beneath the reflective surface. Ghosts of letters, as if something had been erased not long ago. The radio crackled. You've passed it, the man's voice said. I snapped my head toward the dashboard. My heart thudded painfully against my ribs. What? I whispered. The radio continued as if nothing had happened, the man resuming his calm, meaningless commentary. I stared at the dial, my reflection faintly visible in the dark plastic. Eyes too bright, face stretched tight. The road curved gently to the right. I hadn't noticed it curving before. The forest on the left looked identical to the forest on the right, but something about the spacing felt off. The trees repeated, their trunks forming patterns that made my eyes slide away if I tried to focus too hard. Another sign. Last chance now. I laughed. A short, sharp sound that immediately curdled into something close to a sob. This is ridiculous, I said. I'm just tired. The exit ramp beside that sign was different. Wider, cleaner. The pavement looked newer, darker, like it had been laid recently. And for the first time, I could see a faint light at the bottom of it. Not bright, not welcoming, but present. Steady. My foot eased off the accelerator without me meaning it to. The GPS spoke again. Exit now. The voice was almost kind. I glanced at the speedometer. The needle wavered. 90. 88, then jumped back to 95. The numbers didn't feel anchored to anything real anymore. The hum of the tires against the road grew louder, then quieter, as if the surface itself were changing. I thought about the blank signs, about the repetition, about the way the exits had begun to feel less like options and more like punctuation. Guidance. The forest opened slightly near the ramp, just enough that I saw movement between the trees. Tall shapes, indistinct, standing too still to be natural. They didn't advance. They didn't retreat. They waited. I understood then, with a cold clarity that settled deep in my bones, that nothing had been trying to force me off the road. Nothing had rushed me. Nothing had threatened me. I had been given chances, over and over again. I stayed on the highway. The moment I passed the ramp, the engine coughed. The dashboard lights flickered. The radio fell silent mid-word. The GPS screen went dark, then flashed a single message in plain white text. No more exits. The road ahead narrowed, the yellow lines drawing closer together, the darkness beyond the headlights thickening until it felt solid. The forest leaned in. Behind me, in the rearview mirror, I saw the off-ramp one last time, wide, lit, calm. And standing at its mouth, barely visible in the glow, were shapes turned toward the road, watching patiently as I drove on. Not disappointed, just resigned. The exits hadn't been warnings. They'd been instructions. And I had refused every one.